One of the usual observations of people with the songs of MNL48 is that some lines do not make sense in Filipino grammatically, or their syllabication sounds a bit off. Some words seem to have been translated to literally just to make it faithful to the original material, but why is it like that? In this video, we are gonna be talking about the translations of AKB48 songs by international sister groups and what happens in the process coming up. When the Japanese company AKS started creating international sister groups of the phenomenal Japanese idol group AKB48, it revolves around international sister groups performing translations of AKB48 songs into their languages. As interesting as it sounds, but it's a complicated task, especially for the ones who will do the translations of the song. Since 2012, many AKB48 international sister groups were created in Asia, singing covers of AKB48 songs into their languages. Some were successful, but others received criticisms from the local audiences. When handling song translations, there is usually incompatibility between the meaning of the song and the sound when they are spoken. That is because of the phonological system of the language, which shapes the melody of the song written in that language. And when a song is translated into a language with a completely different phonological system, it ends up sounding weird to the ears of the local audience. It's like you can't understand a song performed in your own language, or you can understand the letters but it doesn't make sense grammatically in your language, especially when the translation is too literal, as in word for word. A song translation could sound good but inaccurate in meaning, or it is accurate in meaning but it sounds bad because it is phonologically different from the language it is being translated. And another thing to add is the cultural context of the song from the original language, which when translated to a new language in a country with a completely different culture, when translated to literally will not make sense, and more problems arise when the owner of the original songs or material controls how it should be translated and will only approve it unless you comply. And that is the problem with AKB48 international sister groups. There have been many instances that translations of AKB48 songs by international sister groups have been criticized. Some raise eyebrows and some laughs at it because it sounded weird in their language, and this hinders the marketing success of international sister groups in their country because the songs either don't make sense or it sounds weird, if not bad. Imagine a lyric shaped by the Japanese culture when translated literally in another language, and the locals could not relate because the culture that the song imparts does not exist in their country. What many people think is that when an international sister groups is formed, then they no longer need permission from AKS, or now known as Vernalosum, to cover AKB48 songs. The real business behind AKB48 sister groups is paying royalties, and yes, all international sister groups pays royalties to the right owners, Vernalosum, every time a song is translated or performed. And once they gain the rights, they are now allowed to translate the song into their language. And speaking of translations, Japanese company AKS, known nowadays as Vernalosum, imposes control on translations, utilizing a requirement that new song should be as close to the original material. One instance about an AKB48 translation in Chinese is by SNH48. It was a song that speaks about sadness of parting ways with friends at graduation while the cherry blossom blooms. As the word suggests, I assume that this was Sakura no Hanabiratachi by SNH48. The problem is that cherry blossom blooms in March during the spring season, while the graduation season in China is every June during summer, and because of that, that song from SNH48 has become a laughing stock among the Chinese audience because it didn't make sense. Chinese graduates every June, not March. And aside from controls with the translation requiring them to comply as close to that of the original version, most if not all the time, international sister groups only performs covers of AKB48 songs, and they are rarely allowed to release original songs. That is also one of the reasons why SNH48 parted ways with AKB48 in 2016, because they were pursuing to create original content by creating their own songs instead of performing old covers of AKB48 songs, and still keeping the 48G brand. One of the contributing factors to the success of BNK48 in Thailand is the Thai lyrics of the songs. They modified the Japanese version into narratives that Thai people could understand and omitting some details that Thai people will not understand. Though the Japanese team in the beginning imposes to Thai team to translate AKB48 lyrics in every detail, but the Thai team and music director who writes the Thai lyrics explained that the word-for-word translation and compliance to the original narration will not work because of grammatical limitations, and it will not be relatable to the local Thai audience. I am not an expert in both Thai and Japanese language, but by doing so, it is safe to say that the Thai translations no longer has the same meaning as that in Japanese because they needed to remove details that Thai people could not relate to, but at least the songs made sense to the local Thai audience, contributing to BNK48's marketing success. It was mentioned that Thailand lacked this kind of music genre for the longest time, and given the language and content that the Thai audience would be familiar to, plus the catchy melody and the Japanese-style uniforms contributes to the success of BNK48, and one of the most phenomenal BNK48 songs in Thailand is Koisuru Fortune Cookie or Cookie Shanghai in Thailand. So given the examples from SNH48 and BNK48, there shows the control Japan team imposes on international sister groups in translating songs. SNH48 receives negative remarks for complying too much with the requirements imposed by the Japanese team, while on the other hand, in the case of BNK48, they explained that they needed to omit some details and add narratives relatable to the Thai audiences to make BNK48 marketing work, and it did. But the main point is that Japan team imposes requirements in translations, which is becoming a challenge for the local team in translating the song, and we haven't discussed about MNL48 yet. In the case of MNL48, this is one of the challenges they have to face. Same as the given examples from SNH48 and BNK48, the Japan team requires that the song should be translated as close as possible to the original material, which often ends up bad. Most of the comments you will often hear when a non-fan or a casual observer hears an MNL48 song is that it sounds too anime-ish or grammatically it sounds weird in Filipino. And there have been several MNL48 songs that have been criticized because of their translations. For instance, the line in Ay Takata Gustong Makita, para kang burol na matarik, though it adheres to the original melody of Ay Takata in Japanese, the way it is pronounced made the meaning completely different in Filipino. Burol in English means a vigil held beside the body of someone who died, while it should be pronounced shortly as burol, which means a hill, which what the Japanese lyrics actually meant. Another one is the line in Pag-ibig Fortune Cookie, sa kantin ay tumutugtog ang music, as if Filipinos cannot pronounce the English word music properly. And yes, one of the things that MNL48 has to comply with as imposed by their mother management in Japan is that their song should be performed with a Japanese accent, making their song sound more like an anime soundtrack. While others could relate to this, especially those who loves anime but not everyone does. And we all know that the Philippine culture is heavily influenced by the Western culture, and anything that doesn't have a touch of the West is unrelatable if not weird. Although I still believe that MNL48 songs can be improved if what they will do is more of an adaptation rather than a word-for-word literal translations. Although as I have learned in researching this content, the Japanese team seems to be complicated to deal with, like the situation of SNH48 for instance, and same as what BNK48 did, they explained that for their language, word-for-word literal translation will not work, and instead, they rendered their version in a way that will be relatable to the local audience. And that's all I have for you guys in this video, and I hope you learned a lot of things about what happens in the process when an AKB48 song is being translated to be performed by their international sister groups. And if you would like to see future contents just like this one, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you stay till the end of this video, I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, friends.